there, and welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're flipping through some fascinating historical music sources to unpack a total mystery. How on earth did a group of deeply introverted musicians completely turn the rules of rock music upside down? We're going to break down this 1990s British movement that totally traded traditional rock ego for pure, overwhelming volume. And more importantly, we're going to see exactly how they pulled it off. To really grasp this massive shift, just think about the contrast. On one hand, you have that classic in-your-face frontman energy of the 1980s, right? We're talking bombastic hair metal, massive arena rock, lead singers belting out lyrics and working the crowd into an absolute frenzy. It was all ego. But then, you flip to a totally different vibe. Sources describe these concerts where the band completely ignores you. They stand almost paralyzed on stage, just staring at the floor and drowning their vocals in this ear-splitting wall of guitar noise. It was a complete anti-showmanship blueprint. One that was actually pioneered by artists like The Cure's Robert Smith, just standing perfectly still and letting the sheer weight of the music do all the heavy lifting. Now, what's really interesting here is the term itself. Shoegazing wasn't exactly a badge of honor at first. It was actually coined as an insult by the famously cynical British music press. They were openly mocking these bands, saying, look at them, just staring at their shoes during a gig. From the outside, it probably looked like pure arrogance, or maybe just sheer boredom. But here's the secret. That physical passivity, it was a total decoy. They weren't ignoring the crowd at all. They were just locked in intense concentration. They were looking down because they were constantly triggering massive, complex arrays of effects pedals right at their feet. Which brings us to Section 1, a cocoon of pure sound, the socioeconomic catalyst. Let's look at why they actually needed this sound in the first place. To understand this musical inversion, historical texts point us straight toward the socioeconomic realities of 1980s Britain. They describe a very specific, really heavy cultural malaise. And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. The texts trace it directly to high youth unemployment, widespread industrial decay, the lingering dread of the Cold War, and the direct impact of Thatcher's political policies. So for these kids, creating this highly insular sound wasn't just some artsy stylistic choice. It was a vital escapist reaction. They were quite literally building a protective psychological cocoon out of pure sound, just to shield themselves from the outside world. And let me tell you, this cocoon was definitely not built with quiet acoustic guitars. That physical passivity we just talked about, it masked some really intense mechanical wizardry and just sheer overwhelming volume. This was spearheaded mostly by the absolute titans of the genre, My Bloody Valentine and their frontman Kevin Shields, especially on their landmark 1991 album Loveless. The texts describe how they engineered physical sonic illusions and ear-splitting sub-bass vibrations that were so intense they could literally shake a neighboring shop. In fact, the sources share this wild, almost unbelievable historical anecdote that really drives home just how aggressively loud this introverted music actually was. So at one of their shows, those sub-bass vibrations were rattling a neighboring shop so violently that a local butcher literally chased the singer's sister with a meat cleaver, just to force them to cut the venue's power. I mean, it's an insane visual, but it perfectly hits the nail on the head regarding the paradox here. You had the most physically passive musicians creating the most physically violent waves of sound. So how did they do it? Let's check out Section 2, Engineering the Noise, the Illusions of Kevin Shields. So the crucial point is how Kevin Shields engineered these sonic illusions without relying on studio magic. There's this persistent myth out there that the massive sound of Loveless came from hundreds of digital overdubs. But actually, scratch that. It's totally false. Shields pioneered a revolutionary technique called glide guitar. Step 1, he took a standard tremolo arm, which is usually pretty loose, and taped it up so it stayed rigidly fixed right under his fingers. Step 2, he held it constantly while strumming his guitar. And Step 3, this unique setup let him endlessly bend the pitch of every single chord in real time. The result? This incredible, seasick, pitch-bending wash. It was a completely new, incredibly physical way of playing the instrument. And they didn't just toss out the rulebook on playing, they totally upended how you mix a record, too. Think about standard audio mixing. Engineers are usually fighting tooth and nail to remove amplifier hiss, right? It's considered bad noise. And they heavily engineer the lead vocals to sit right on top of the mix, like a boat floating on water. Well, shoegaze mixing did the exact opposite. Shields intentionally kept all that bad noise. He kept the amplifier hiss. And instead of floating the vocals on top, he EQ'd them to sit directly inside the guitar frequencies. They acted almost like a woodwind section blending into an orchestra. He brilliantly hid the human element directly inside the machine's mistakes, turning the voice into just another instrument lost in the wash. Moving on to Section 3, the transatlantic feedback loop. UK wash meets US punk. Believe it or not, this highly insular British sonic illusion only crystallized because of a complete happy accident. Shields was trying to figure out spatial effects, and he just happened to read a magazine interview where the American punk rocker Bob Mould offhandedly bragged about using reverse reverb. Now, Shields had absolutely no clue what that even was, but that single boast got him to blindly go out and buy some digital effects gear. He started running his guitar through a 100% wet reverse reverb signal, and because the artificial echo plays in reverse, you hear none of the original strum, it just fades in slowly, completely erasing the sharp plink of the pick hitting the string. That complete misunderstanding of the gear is exactly what smeared their audio into that signature fluid oceanic wave. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most beautiful transatlantic dialogues in music history. Look at how this played out. Kevin Shields reads the boast, buys the gear, basically creates a new genre, and is so incredibly appreciative of the sound that he gifts Bob Mould a custom buzz pedal. A pedal, by the way, that was heavily rumored to have belonged to Jimi Hendrix. Then, over on the flip side, Bob Mould receives this legendary pedal, is so moved by the gesture that he writes a tribute song literally titled Gift. In that track, Mould steps on that exact pedal, mimics My Bloody Valentine's signature glide guitar sound, and even mirrors their vocal melodies. The aggression of American punk completely expanded the textural vocabulary of British shoegaze and then handed an entirely new emotional range right back to the punks. It was an absolutely perfect feedback loop. Okay, let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, Zoomergaze and Spatial Audio, the Modern Resurgence. So, why does all this 90s history matter to us right now? Because shoegaze proved that right inside chaotic, ear-splitting distortion, you can actually construct transcendent beauty. And today, it's experiencing a massive modern resurgence. There's a huge wave of what people are calling Zoomer gaze, finding incredible success on TikTok right now. It is quite literally scoring the lives of a completely new, anxious generation who are seeking out the exact same sonic refuge from the world that those kids in 1980s Britain were desperately looking for. Which brings us to a really fascinating final point for you to chew on as we wrap up this explainer. Think about our modern tech landscape for a second. Are we, with our modern obsession with spatial audio, noise-canceling headphones, and VR headsets, are we just chasing the exact same immersive, egoless envelopment that these kids built with taped-up guitars and effect pedals back in the 90s? Are we all just stepping inside the noise, trying to find a little bit of peace? Definitely some food for thought. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.